I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan. We are Mountain Murders, an Appalachian true crime podcast dropping weekly episodes every Sunday.
Our show offers well-researched cases with unique storytelling and southern flavor.
Stories so good you'll want to sop them up with a biscuit.
Ooh, I pull back the curtain on lesser-known and often obscure regional cases from Georgia to Maine, exploring the darkness that lurks deep in the heart of Appalachia.
And I react with profound statements.
You mean profoundly stupid statements?
Something like that.
We're not your stereotypical hillbillies.
But we do like moonshine.
It'll tickle your innards.
Join us every Wednesday for Mountain Murders Offbeat.
Offbeat is a mini episode covering a variety of topics from true crime to conspiracy theories, the paranormal, and Appalachian-centric subjects.
Find Mountain Murders anywhere you download podcasts. Hit subscribe today to catch up on our latest episodes or binge our catalog.
Darkcast Network. Out of the shadows come the best of any podcast. Hey y'all, I'm Jamie, and you are listening to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+.
Hey, this is a true crime show with adult topics and adult words. Please listen at your discretion. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host along the coast, CJ. I have a birthday coming up next month, and my daughter keeps asking me what I want to do for it. I have no clue. It's not a big one. That'll be next year. And next year, I would love to go visit the East Coast, in what I call the Liberty States, for a week and a half at least. Wish I had a traveling partner, though. I'm sure I could go with the kids, but after Denver, I may just be traveling alone. I wish I could just take my daughter, but her and her boyfriend seem to be attached at the hips. So that's a no-go. If anyone wants to go, apply within. I'm still taking recorded sound bites if you're willing to do one for me. All you have to do is record on your phone this. Darkcast Network. Out of the shadows come the best of indie podcast. I'm, and then insert your name, and you're listening to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. And then email the recording to me. I'll leave a copy of this little script in my email in the show notes. With that, let's get into it. The police called him a serial killer in the making. And quite honestly, he checked many of the boxes. He even surpassed some of the qualifications of becoming a serial killer. Like, instead of going by 3 names, as many serial killers are referred to, this guy had 4. William Frederick Ian Beggs was a violent man with a propensity to take his hostility out on gay men. He loathed the fact that he was attracted to certain guys he would see. He wanted sex with them, but after the sex, he was completely disgusted with himself and the act of fornication with someone of his same gender. But what the police didn't know was that William might already have been a serial killer. I hate to admit this, but William was born under the sign of Libra on October 4th, 1963. He was either born in London or Ireland. There's conflicting information as to which country, but it was definitely in the UK. He grew up in Northern Ireland. As for his astrological sign, us Libras are usually very good people, and that's why it's a hard pill to swallow for me when killers are Libras. William's parents, William and Winifred, were very religious, so he and his 4 younger siblings were raised on a strict regime of school and worship. That's pretty much all their lives consisted of growing up. Attending a Quaker school as a child, William refused to comply with how the school wanted him to behave. The school tried to teach tolerance and respect for the human life, but those were just not life skills William was interested in. Instead, he was a loner and a social outcast from his peers and teachers. Everyone thought he was an odd duck and kinda creepy. They referred to him as the greasy-haired rocker. While other boys were interested in sports, William would rather spend hours in his bedroom blasting heavy metal music and screaming along with the words. He wasn't a bad student, and he was far from dumb. He was just more interested in his music. In his teen years, he started to form an unhealthy interest in boys that were younger than him. He was scolded in a park for pulling down a boy's pants. When I worked with kids, we used to have boys who thought it was hilarious to pull down the pants of one of their friends in front of everyone. They would get in so much trouble for doing this because of the humiliation it caused their victim. Pantsing, which is what the kids called it, should have been called depantsing. Now, the kids I worked with who were doing this were 10, 11, and 12-year-old kids, old enough to be starting puberty soon. It never crossed my mind that the perpetrator or perpetrators of the depantsing might have had an underlying sexual issue of their own. But that does kind of give me an aha moment about them. For William, he was not just scolded for his action of pulling the boy's pants down, but the older brother of the boy found William, and he beat the shit out of him. At the age of 19, William was ready to leave Ireland and head to England. It also didn't help that he was kind of being forced out after the Ulster Volunteer Force of Ireland discovered he had a lust for younger boys. This militia group were considered terrorists by some, but they were formed to combat the Irish Republic paramilitary in particular, the IRA. Nevertheless, the group had their own way to deal with pedophiles, and that was either to beat them or shoot them in their head. Leaving was fine with William. He was ready to start a fresh and new journey in life. In 1982, William began college at Teesside Polytechnic. This school is in England. He would become known to fellow students for his conservative and loyalist views. They also saw him as a violent drunk with a special hostility for gay men. For nighttime fun, William would cruise all the hot spots the city of Newcastle had to offer him. But by 1985, William's name began to appear as a person of interest within the police department of Middlesbrough. This is where he lived. After attacking his roommate with an open razor, William was being looked at for a series of 14 knife and razor attacks upon men that occurred around northern England. The attacks all happened between 1983 and 1987, just after William arrived. He was brought into the Middlesbrough police station for questioning after he was found carving symbols into the thighs of a man he had just slept with. This would have been a little later in 1985. His actions were considered an indecent assault case. He was asked about the other razor and knife attacks, but he was never charged for the human carving he was actually caught doing. Set free, William went on to graduate from Teesside Polytechnic in 1987. Pretty much any man who William had sex with, he would torture, and he would carve into the man after sex. This was William's inner anger and self-hatred acting out. Some of the men reported William to the police, but most wouldn't for fear of being outed or tossed aside by the police. William had no problem with straight men either. He would drink it up with them and then invite them back to his place where they were too drunk to make a rational decision. And when the straight man would come back to William's place, he'd sexually assault and attack them. Later, he'd brag that straight guys were the best to meet and do things to, because they were way too embarrassed to go to the police with what happened. On May 26th of 1987, William, now 24 years old, would meet a guy who was older than him named Barry Oldham at a gay club called Rock Shots. Barry was 28, and the meeting was by chance. When the two men left the club, they headed to William's apartment. Barry was from Bolton, a town in the greater Manchester area of England. But in his 20s, he had moved around quite a bit, taking pub and nightclub jobs as he went. It just so happened the same night when he met William, Barry had just moved to Newcastle and he was looking for work. Barry stepped off the bus in Newcastle. He had just arrived from his last place of residence. He rented a locker at the bus station to put his stuff in, and then he headed off to the nearest gay nightclub. The following day, on May 27, 1987, Barry's half-naked, mutilated, and nearly decapitated body was found in the North Yorkshire moors. There were many injuries to his body, making it appear that Barry's limbs were attempted to be sawed or cut off. William was seen by witnesses leaving Rockshot's nightclub with Barry the night before his body was discovered, and William was promptly found and arrested for the murder of Barry Oldham. During William's trial, he claimed the gay panic defense. He told the court that he and Barry went on a camping trip, and that Barry put moves on him, so anything he did to Barry was self-defense. A jury of William's peers didn't buy the gay panic defense, especially since William took Barry home from a gay nightclub. They found him guilty of murder as well as the attempted dismemberment of a body and disposal. The judge sentenced William to a life of incarceration. But within a year, William was appealing his sentence, stating his trial was unfair and that the jury should not have been privy to his prior violent tendencies towards men. He claimed that the information prejudiced the jury against him. After only 2 years in prison, William would be released by a judge who agreed that William did not have a fair trial. But how the fuck was any of it fair for Barry Oldham? Thanks to William, he no longer had his life. But William was now living again as a free man, and he was at liberty to do whatever the hell he wanted once again. And he did, including picking up and moving again, away from England. He stealthily spent a little more time in Ireland before embarking upon Scotland. One night in 1991, William had met a man at a gay nightclub. The man went home to Kilmarnock, Scotland with William. That man, he escaped William's violent after-sex tendencies by jumping out of William's bathroom window. He had said he and William had sex, fell asleep, and then he awoke to William holding a knife over him, trying to cut him. He jumped up and he grabbed for William's wrists. He was freaked out by William's sense of calmness. He said that the look in William's eyes was almost vacant, as if no one was there. The man continued to say that William tried to put him at ease by telling him to come back to bed. It'll all be over soon. You've made me want to do this to you. Somehow, the man managed to lock himself in William's bathroom. Then he jumped out of a glass window naked to safety. Thankfully, William's apartment was a first-floor flat. Moving ahead now to the year 1999, 12 years since William had murdered Barry Oldham in England. A 36-year-old William was still residing in Scotland. William's radar honed on to an 18-year-old Barry Wallace, who was a grocery store clerk. William was wildly attracted to Barry, but this Barry was not gay and had a serious girlfriend. As stated earlier, William had a fancy for straight guys too, and he was still very highly attracted to younger men. On December 4th, 1999, Barry would attend a work Christmas party. He was pretty excited because he arranged to have the whole weekend off. There was also another party he was going to attend after the work party, so Barry was planning on a night of merriment. But after leaving his work's Christmas party and on his way to the next, Barry somehow came into contact with William. William lured Barry to his home, most likely promising him more drinks to celebrate his night before heading off to the other party. Once at William's home, Barry was handcuffed both at his wrist and his ankles. And then he was raped and murdered. William then set out to dismember Barry's body for easier disposal. Barry's decapitated head had been thrown in the Sea of Troon, and it was found by someone who was walking their dog on a nearby beach. Barry's limbs and torso were disposed of in Loch Lomond. Loch Lomond is a freshwater lake considered to be the boundary between the Highlands and the lowlands of central Scotland. This is also how William earned the moniker the Limbs in the Loch Killer. And although Barry's body was in pieces, the medical examiner surmised that Barry most likely died from the shock of being brutally assaulted by William. The police in Kilmarnock, Scotland were already wise to William and the acts he perpetrated. After Barry Wallace's body parts started to surface, William was being looked at for the murder, and he knew it. He fled to Amsterdam. And thankfully, police still had eyeballs on William. 2 weeks later, the Dutch police were detaining William, while the Scottish police were able to successfully extradite him back to Scotland. Here, he would be arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Barry Wallace. At this trial, William would again be found guilty of the heinous murder, and he would again be sentenced to life in prison, which in the UK is about 20 years. William placed many appeals, and while he was in prison, he took up studying the law and he became a representative for himself, as well as some of his other inmates. William fought the court system to be freed, but he failed and he was made to serve out his 20-year minimum sentence. When his parole hearing came up, he was denied parole based on the fact that he was still a danger to society, and that he refused to comply with doing the work that was based on his offenses while he was in prison. It sounds like the justice system in Scotland might do more reform-type things with their prisoners than we seem to do here in the States. Thankfully, the 61-year-old William still sits in prison. At this time, it's only been speculated William may have killed other men during his time on Earth, but nothing has been proven. Rest in power, Barry and Barry. Our True Crime Quickie this episode is from April of this year, 2024, in Memphis, Tennessee. She worked at a fast food restaurant in Memphis called Checkers. It had been a long shift, but it was finally done for the night. It was around 2:30 a.m., and Starr walked out to her car and got in. She sat behind the wheel for a few, and she started to think about how she was dreading her long ride home. Her motivation was just to get home to her small apartment, kick off her shoes, release the girls by taking her bra off, and relax until she fell asleep. Starr Brown was assigned male at birth, but now she was living as who she was meant to be. Sure, 28-year-old Starr had her fair share of twats who bullied her and picked on her, and even worse were the not-so-quiet whispers of the people she knew who were not accepting of her. Although she wasn't born in the correct body, she was born to be a fighter and stand up for what she knew was right. Starr would fiercely smile her way through the shit talk, and to counter all of that, Starr promised herself she would always be encouraging of others and always have uplifting words for them. With her thoughts going back to her long drive home, she turned the key in her ignition. She put her car in drive, and she was about to pull out of the Checkers parking lot when someone walked up to her passenger side window. It was a familiar face of one of her co-workers, Alexavier Williamson. Her and Alexavier had often shared a cigarette when they were on a smoke break. Not really wanting to deal with anything or anyone from work after her long day, she hesitantly rolled down her window. Alexavier and her had a brief exchange of words, and CCTV footage show Alexavier getting into Starr's car with her. The car pulled out of the Checkers parking lot and stopped suddenly along a nearby wooded road. A loud crack and a flash of light rang into the night air. Starr slumped over her steering wheel, dead. Starr's body was found in her car around 9:30 a.m. that following morning near an elementary school. Police retrieved the CCTV footage from the fast food restaurant, and they saw that the last person to presumably see Starr alive, and that was 20-year-old Alex Xavier. He was getting into Starr's vehicle. Alex Xavier was arrested and charged with Starr's murder. No real motive has been given as to why he felt the need to take Starr's life. As of now, Alex Xavier will be going to trial for second-degree murder charges. Trial has not yet begun with this case being so new. Rest in power, Starr. I love you, Rainbow Warriors. You matter. And remember, it's not a crime to live your truth, unless you're a murderer.